Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the Islamic Shahada channel. There is a road in York County, South Carolina, that few maps mark and fewer people speak of. It winds through pine forests and over creeks, past farmland and forest, until it ends at an unassuming gate. On the gate, a sign reads, "Private Property." Beyond it lie modest wooden houses, a small prayer hall, open fields, and people who greet each other quietly with "Assalamu alaikum." For the average passerby, it could be mistaken for any other quiet rural settlement in the American South, perhaps a Christian retreat or a small intentional community. But for those who know, this place carries another name, Islamville, or as its residents call it, Holy Islamville, a village born not out of politics or isolation, but faith. Islamville was founded in 1983 by members of the Muslims of America, MOA, under the spiritual guidance of Sheikh Mubarak Ali Shah Gilani, a Sufi scholar originally from Pakistan. At the time, America's Muslim population was still small and fragmented, a mosaic of immigrant families, African American converts, and a few scattered communities searching for a place to belong. The residents who came to Islamville sought precisely that, belonging. They wanted to live close to nature, free from the moral decay and crime they saw consuming American cities in the 1980s, and build a place where children could grow up surrounded by faith, modesty, and peace. The story of Islamville begins in the early 1980s, a time when Islam in America was still finding its identity, and Muslim converts, especially African Americans, were searching for a spiritual home that could exist beyond prejudice and urban struggle. It was during this period that Sheikh Mubarak Ali Shah Gilani, a Sufi scholar from Pakistan, began inspiring Muslims across the United States to build rural, self-sustained communities rooted in faith and discipline. His idea was simple yet profound, that spiritual life must have room to grow, away from the distractions and hostility of the modern city. Following his guidance, a small group of American Muslims, many of them new converts and African American families, purchased a piece of land in York County, South Carolina, in 1983. It was far from the noise of the cities, a place surrounded by trees, peace, and silence. They called it Islamville. Later, the place would also be known as Holy Islamville, not as a sign of separation, but as a declaration of sacred intention. It was a space for renewal, built on faith, community, and shared purpose. From the very beginning, Islamville was closely connected to a larger organization called the Muslims of America, MOA, a network of similar Islamic villages across the United States, all inspired by Sheikh Gilani's teachings. Alongside this, the International Quranic Open University, IQOU, was established to provide education, research, and spiritual training, a cornerstone institution that emphasized both religious and moral development. The founding vision of Islamville was not isolation, but integration through faith, a living example that Muslims could practice Islam fully while remaining part of the American social fabric. The first years in Islamville were marked by immense struggle and sacrifice. The families who settled there faced harsh conditions. There was no running water, no paved roads, no electricity in the beginning. Water had to be drawn from wells. Houses were not bought. They were built, plank by plank, by the very people who lived in them. These early settlers worked the land with their own hands, learned carpentry, farming, and construction, and created a system of shared labor and shared faith. It was not comfort that kept them there, but conviction. Education was central from day one. Children were taught not only to read and write, but to memorize the Quran, understand Islamic law, and live with discipline and humility. The adults also studied, not in formal universities, but through study circles, lectures, and correspondence programs with the International Quranic Open University. They learned Arabic, religious studies, and life skills, from cultivating food to repairing machinery. Islamville was, in many ways, a living classroom of faith in action. The residents faced skepticism and suspicion from outside communities, especially in the early years. Misunderstandings about Islam, often fueled by negative media portrayals and Cold War-era fears, made life even harder. Yet, through patience and openness, the people of Islamville worked to build bridges rather than walls. They invited journalists, researchers, and curious visitors to come and see for themselves, to understand that Islamville was not a compound, but a community of faith, family, and purpose. Despite challenges, from poverty to prejudice, Islamville endured. Its people prayed together, built together, and raised generations that would carry their legacy forward. By the late 1980s, Islamville was no longer just a settlement. It had become a symbol of self-determination for Muslim Americans seeking to live authentically without compromising their beliefs. The founding principle remained unchanged: to build a moral society rooted in Islam, peace, and service, right in the heart of America. What began as an act of faith in 1983 evolved into a living example of resilience, a place where spiritual purpose transformed hardship into harmony. For the families who first set foot on that land in York County, Islamville was not merely a refuge from prejudice, it was a statement to the world that faith could flourish anywhere, that Islam could be lived with dignity, and that a small community of believers, guided by sincerity, could carve out a life of peace and purpose on American soil. In 2025, life inside Islamville moves with a rhythm that feels timeless, a rhythm not defined by technology or commerce, but by prayer, purpose, and peace. Each day begins before dawn, when the call to Fajr prayer rises gently through the quiet South Carolina air. The residents wake early, gather in small groups, and stand shoulder to shoulder in devotion. The world outside might still be asleep, but within Islamville, the first act of the day is one of remembrance, a reminder that life begins with gratitude. After prayer, the village comes to life. Parents prepare their children for class. Some men and women head out to work in nearby towns, in construction, education, or small trade, while others stay within the village, teaching, tending to maintenance, or caring for elders. There are no large commercial centers, no chains, no traffic noise. Islamville was never meant to be an economic hub. It was built to be a spiritual home, a place where the essentials of life are preserved without excess. Agriculture remains a respected practice. Residents maintain small gardens and green spaces, reflecting the Prophet's teaching that caring for the earth is part of faith. Simple living is not seen as deprivation here. It is a deliberate act of worship, a conscious choice to live closer to nature and to God. Children's education blends the sacred and the practical. They learn the Quran, Arabic, and Islamic ethics, alongside mathematics, English, and science. Their lessons take place not in massive institutions, but in simple classrooms that embody sincerity over status. The central place of worship, Masjid Fatima, serves both as a mosque and as a communal gathering hall. It is here that prayers, sermons, and Quranic recitations shape the spiritual rhythm of Islamville's daily life. Every action, from teaching to cooking, from cleaning to prayer, is guided by the idea that faith is not a part of life, it is life. Education has always been the backbone of Islamville's existence. The International Quranic Open University, IQOU, founded under the vision of Sheikh Gilani, continues to guide the community's spiritual and intellectual development. IQOU's curriculum is designed not only to teach Islam, but to nurture the heart. Its programs cover Quranic memorization, Arabic, jurisprudence, and Sufi spiritual training, but also literacy, mathematics, and language arts. The goal is to prepare young Muslims to live faithfully in the modern world, to understand both religion and reason, both the soul and society. Classes emphasize discipline and humility. Students are encouraged to balance memorization with understanding, to apply the Quran not as a distant scripture, but as a living moral compass. Beyond education, the community's leadership structure reflects Islamic principles of shura, or mutual consultation. There is no mayor or formal political head. Instead, decisions are made collectively through discussions among senior members, teachers, and elders. In media and public matters, Ramadan Saeed Shakir is often recognized as a community spokesperson. He has represented Islamville in interviews and public statements, particularly when addressing misconceptions about the community or responding to national debates about Islam in America. Shakir's message is consistent, that Islamville is not a separatist movement, but a faith-based community that seeks peace, order, and self-determination, values deeply rooted in both Islam and American civic life. As of 2025, Islamville remains small, intimate even. Rough estimates suggest around 300 residents live within its borders. Many of them were born and raised here, while others joined later through marriage, conversion, or spiritual pursuit. Most families are African American, reflecting the deep historical connection between Islam and Black identity in the United States. Some residents have immigrant roots from Pakistan, the Caribbean, or the Middle East, but the community's culture has grown uniquely American. Households often include multiple generations: grandparents who helped build the village in the 1980s, their children who now lead educational programs, and the younger generation growing up in a world very different from the one their parents knew. Economically, life remains modest. There are no internal business districts, malls, or industrial zones. Residents earn their income through jobs in nearby towns or remote work, and they engage in normal civic responsibilities. They pay taxes, vote, and participate in public affairs. Yet the defining feature of life here is not economic activity, it's spiritual continuity. Islamville stands as one of the few remaining examples of an intentional religious community in America that has survived for over 4 decades without abandoning its founding vision. The people of Islamville walk a delicate line between two worlds, one deeply spiritual, the other deeply modern. They engage with technology, education, and society, but they do so with mindfulness, ensuring that modernity serves faith, not the other way around. The outside world may view Islamville as unusual, a quiet village of Muslims living by their own rhythm. But for its residents, this is not isolation. It is preservation, the preservation of prayer, family, and peace in an age of distraction. 4 decades after its founding, Islamville remains a living testimony that simplicity and spirituality can coexist. That in a world driven by consumption, a small village in South Carolina still chooses contentment over competition and faith over fear. For more than 40 years, Islamville has lived under the shadow of misunderstanding. Nestled in the quiet landscape of York County, South Carolina, it has become, paradoxically, both invisible and infamous, a place many Americans have never seen, but have heard of through rumor, speculation, and conspiracy. Since the early 2000s, particularly after September 11, 2001, Islamville has been targeted by waves of suspicion. Online forums, talk radio, and political blogs began labeling it a terrorist compound or a training camp. Some alleged it was preparing for conflict. Others claimed it was secretly linked to foreign extremists. But these accusations have never been substantiated. Law enforcement agencies, from the FBI to local sheriff's departments, have repeatedly confirmed that no evidence of illegal or extremist activity has ever been found in Islamville or in any other community associated with the Muslims of America organization. Despite this, the rumors persist. Like an echo that refuses to die, they resurface each time national tensions rise or political discourse turns toward fear. For residents, these myths are not harmless. They have real consequences: psychological, social, and even physical. Families describe moments when cars slowed outside the village gates, cameras pointed through the fence, and strangers shouted accusations. Children have asked their parents why people call their home dangerous. In interviews, community members have expressed a deep weariness, a fatigue from being explained, defended, and doubted for so many years. People see our sign that says private property, and they imagine the worst, said one resident in a local report from 2024. But behind that gate, there are only families, mothers, fathers, children, trying to live in peace, trying to worship, and trying to be left alone. In the years following 2016, the political climate in the United States became increasingly polarized, and Islamville, like many Muslim communities, felt the pressure. The rhetoric of Donald Trump's presidency and later his 2024 campaign reawakened anxieties that had once begun to fade. Discussions about Muslim bans, extremism, and loyalty re-entered public speech, sometimes echoed by local political candidates seeking visibility. While Trump himself did not directly reference Islamville, his broader tone toward Muslim identity in America created what residents describe as a climate of suspicion. By 2025, media monitoring reports and public statements from Muslim advocacy organizations such as CAIR, Council on American Islamic Relations, noted a measurable increase in anti-Muslim incidents both online and offline. Harassment, vandalism, and social exclusion became more common. Within this environment, Islamville's residents have had to navigate a subtle but constant pressure, not from government raids or formal investigations, but from the social weight of being watched. Ramadan Saeed Shakir, the community's public voice, has spoken openly about the difficulty of living under this scrutiny. "We are American citizens," he told a local journalist in early 2025. "We vote, we pay taxes, we raise our children here, but we are still treated as outsiders, as if our faith disqualifies our belonging." For Islamville, politics has never been a pursuit. The community does not endorse parties, does not fund campaigns, and avoids public demonstrations. Their way is quiet faith, not political confrontation. Yet, in America's polarized atmosphere, neutrality itself becomes a statement, and sometimes a target. Even local relationships are shaped by this dynamic. While many neighbors have grown more understanding over the years, new waves of misinformation online, especially through social media platforms like Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok, continue to distort perceptions. Posts labeling Islamville as a no-go zone or Sharia training base periodically go viral, prompting unwanted visitors and renewed anxiety. Still, despite all this, the community endures. When asked in a 2025 documentary interview what keeps them strong, a resident replied softly, "They call us strange, but we've never raised weapons. We've only raised children." That's the truth they don't want to see. In recent years, journalists from reputable outlets, including the Charlotte Observer, NPR South Carolina, and Religion News Service, have attempted to set the record straight. Their coverage highlights a striking contrast: the gap between the myth and the reality of Islamville. They describe the village not as an armed compound, but as a faith-based cooperative community, one that provides moral education, supports families, and fosters independence. The Muslims of America, MOA, the umbrella organization that oversees Islamville and similar rural enclaves, has consistently invited reporters, academics, and law enforcement officials to visit and see the reality firsthand. Open houses, interfaith events, and community outreach efforts have become part of their strategy to dispel fear with transparency. Yet, as many members admit, truth spreads slower than fear. In an age of viral misinformation, where sensational headlines outperform facts, Islamville finds itself caught in a paradox. The more it tries to explain itself, the more people suspect it has something to hide. That paradox has shaped the daily psychology of the community. Many families have learned to remain quiet, choosing discretion over debate. They focus inward, on education, prayer, and preservation, believing that stability itself is the most powerful response to prejudice. To live in Islamville in 2025 is to live under two labels, one internal, one external. Inside, the label is one of belonging, Muslim, believer, brother, sister, family. Outside, the label can be alien, suspicious, separatist, other. The tension between these identities defines much of the community's emotional landscape. And yet, when you walk its narrow roads or sit in its prayer hall, that tension fades. Children play, elders greet one another. Life continues quietly, steadily, like a current beneath the noise of the outside world. What outsiders call isolation, residents call intention. What critics call secrecy, they call privacy. And what the world calls strange, they call home. Despite decades of suspicion and conspiracy theories, both local and federal law enforcement have repeatedly investigated Islamville and found nothing to justify claims of extremism or criminal activity. Authorities, from the FBI to South Carolina's own sheriff departments, have made it clear that the community has no ties to terrorism, militancy, or illegal operations. Many of the more sensational accusations circulating online trace back to misinformation campaigns during the post-9/11 era, when fear and confusion painted entire Muslim communities as threats. Over time, each new investigation reached the same conclusion: there is no credible evidence of wrongdoing in Islamville. In response to persistent rumors and media sensationalism, the residents of Islamville have gradually become more proactive in explaining who they are. The community has issued official statements through their parent organization, the Muslims of America, emphasizing peace, education, and public service as their guiding values. They have hosted small permitted visits, usually for journalists, interfaith leaders, or neighboring residents, offering a glimpse into their daily life. These interactions, though limited, often surprise visitors. Instead of a secretive camp, they find a quiet village with families, gardens, prayer halls, and schools. Rather than launching large-scale media campaigns, Islamville prefers local engagement. Their efforts focus on building bridges with nearby towns, churches, and universities. They participate in interfaith events, open discussions, and youth mentorship programs, not to gain attention, but to dispel myths through personal connection. The philosophy behind this approach is simple. Understanding grows from direct human contact, not from arguments on the internet. Through its official website and outreach programs, the Muslims of America highlights initiatives in education, health awareness, and cultural exchange. These include mentorship programs for at-risk youth, community health drives, and annual cultural gatherings meant to showcase Islamic traditions to non-Muslim visitors. For them, transparency is not about publicity. It's about allowing truth to emerge naturally from lived experience. In 2025, Islamville stands at a quiet crossroads between continuity and change. The community, once founded as a refuge for African American Muslims seeking peace and identity, now faces a new chapter shaped by generational transition. The children and grandchildren of the first settlers have grown up in a world far more connected, fast-paced, and digitally mediated than their parents ever imagined. Many of them straddle two worlds at once, one grounded in the rhythms of Islamville's spiritual and communal life, and the other deeply tied to the broader currents of American culture. Some of these young people leave for college in nearby cities, where they experience mainstream American life firsthand, engaging with diverse peers, pursuing careers, and sometimes marrying outside the community. Others eventually return, drawn back by a desire for family, faith, and a slower pace of life. Within Islamville, the transmission of tradition remains a sacred duty. Elders continue to pass down oral histories, Quranic recitations, and the teachings of Sheikh Gilani to the next generation. Evening gatherings, lessons in Arabic, and community meals serve as living spaces of memory, binding the past to the present in ways that few outside the community ever witness. Yet, as much as Islamville values its roots, the digital era presses in from all sides. The internet, once a distant abstraction, now shapes how the world perceives them. Satellite imagery of the village appears in conspiracy videos on YouTube, rumor-driven narratives spread across social media platforms, often recycled without verification. The problem isn't just misinformation, it's the speed and scale of it. Islamville's residents, most of whom live modestly and focus on daily sustenance, lack the institutional resources or digital media teams to respond every time a new accusation goes viral. Instead, they've adopted a quiet but persistent approach. Their official website, operated by the Muslims of America, periodically issues factual updates and statements to clarify their position. Occasionally, members participate in interviews or invite journalists to visit under agreed conditions. These are not aggressive media strategies, but deliberate acts of transparency meant to humanize a community often dehumanized online. As one resident noted in a recent interview, "We're not hiding, we're just living." But in the internet age, living quietly sometimes looks like hiding. Economically, Islamville remains humble. The surrounding region of York County, South Carolina, offers affordable land and a relatively low cost of living, which suits the community's ethos of simplicity and sustainability. Many families engage in small-scale farming, carpentry, or service work in nearby towns. The roads leading to the village are rural, lined with pine trees and open fields. Basic utilities like water, electricity, and internet are available, though the internet speed can lag far behind what's typical in urban or suburban settings. Residents often travel outside the community for essential services, hospitals, grocery stores, high schools, or administrative tasks, relying on nearby Rock Hill or Charlotte for many of their needs. This semi-isolated arrangement reflects both choice and circumstance. Islamville's founders sought a retreat from urban chaos, but the modern world inevitably seeps in through screens, jobs, and education. Life here operates on a smaller scale and a slower rhythm. Families often share tools, meals, and resources. Homes are simple. The mosque remains the heart of social life. The community's value system prizes sustainability and mutual support over material accumulation, a contrast to the consumer-driven ethos of much of contemporary America. For the younger generation, this can be both grounding and challenging. They inherit a legacy of spiritual discipline and communal care, but must navigate careers, digital identities, and social expectations that demand constant visibility and reinvention. In Islamville, faith and fear coexist in a delicate balance, shaping daily life in ways that are both deeply human and profoundly spiritual. Many residents can recall moments when that balance was shaken. There have been times when unfamiliar cars slowed down near the village entrance, when strangers wandered in to take photographs, or when drones hovered briefly overhead. Some have received messages online, hateful, accusatory, or mocking, from people who have never set foot anywhere near South Carolina. These experiences leave a mark. They remind residents that Islamophobia in America is not just an abstract social issue, it's a lived reality. As community spokesperson Ramadan Saeed Shakir said in a recent interview, "Of course we feel uncomfortable and unsafe. It's Islamophobia." His words capture a quiet truth, the unease of being misjudged not for what one does, but for what one believes. The anxiety deepens whenever political campaigns use fear as fuel. Every election cycle brings a new wave of rhetoric about national security, extremism, or foreign influence, words that, to communities like Islamville, often sound like coded suspicion. Even though residents are American citizens who pay taxes, vote, and obey the law, they are reminded that their belonging can still be questioned by a headline, a soundbite, or a viral post. Yet within that atmosphere of uncertainty, Islamville's residents find strength in the same practices that built their community decades ago. Faith here is not a slogan or an identity to be performed. It's a rhythm, woven into every sunrise prayer, every act of charity, every shared meal. The people of Islamville recite Quran together, engage in dhikr, the remembrance of God, and uphold moral discipline as a daily habit rather than a public display. Their resilience comes not from confrontation, but from continuity. They endure through compassion, patience, and prayer. And sometimes transformation happens in the simplest of ways, when curiosity replaces fear. Residents tell stories of neighbors who, after years of suspicion, finally visit the village. They share tea, listen to the adhan, watch families pray, and see that Islamville is not a secretive enclave, but a small faith-based community rooted in kindness. At community gatherings, interfaith dinners, and open-door Fridays, conversations replace rumors. Misunderstanding dissolves face-to-face, not through debate, but through human presence. As one resident reflected, when they see us pray, when they eat with us, they realize we're not different in the way they thought. We just seek peace like everyone else. Thanks for watching until the end. I hope it was useful. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.